because we had shared chapters. As the judge knows.
It lives in your addition.
Yeah, when I lived in Congress.
Okay.
So it was me, Sherry, Michelle.
Did you take
I
and
was
do
beginning to get a little
the
nervous.
whole documents? But I mean, did you have a
Just a
Word
little.
document that was what your original was, that then you struck?
Yeah, I went through a red line. That's a decent place to go through at least 5 iterations of
We have 27 amendments that we have to put the amendments into the original before we can even start.
We went through some things.
It's 3 p.m.
We went through revision. So it
I was
We're
entertained by
on our
Chuck when he
fourth
goes,
version.
Stephen, how he figured out this assessment is just.
We're on going
Yeah,
on
that's
2 years in October.
a
been a
complicated
nightmare.
calculation right there.
So we had none.
Yeah.
It is. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you'll join us for the Pledge of the Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If anybody in the audience would like to speak to the board, please fill out one of the forms in the back and hand it to one of these two gentlemen here on the end. And if you have a phone, please turn it to silent so we don't have phone calls in the middle of the meeting. Thank you. And I'll call the roll. We have with us our attorney, Tony Hughes. Supervisor Tinkle, Supervisor Banks, Supervisor Feinberg, Supervisor Guy, Supervisor Flaherty, our district manager, Chris Shoemaker, and our CPA, Stephen Blake. And with that, I will ask for people that wish to speak.
We have 4 cards today, and first is Phil Measy. He's here to speak to item 6C, Casella turnover.
Phil Measy, representing PPAC. I want to tell you that PPAC completely supports the CDD staff recommendation with regard to the conveyance of Casella 1 and 2, that it shouldn't happen until all the vertical construction is complete. We'd like to add that we believe that the acceptance of those properties, as well as other properties on Cypress Grove, in Cypress Grove, should include that landscaping be brought up to a reasonable standard. We recognize that that element is not in the permit criteria manual. You conveyed Solero, but in the case of Solero, the vertical construction was basically completed, and we think that's appropriate here. There is very, very substantial damage to the roads in Casella 1 and 2, much of which we have documented and have been documented by the staff. And we believe more damage will occur before vertical construction is complete. It seems to us that it makes more sense to convey Cypress Grove Drive before the various neighborhoods are turned over. We haven't done that yet. We have a number of safety concerns on Cypress Grove Drive in addition to the damage that has occurred and will occur before turnover is complete. I've read the letter. I don't know whether the board got it from Darren McMurray of Lennar, in which he suggests that the district or some other party should be assuming maintenance responsibilities in most of Cypress Grove, so that the turnover should occur, and somebody should be assuming, somebody other than Lennar should be assuming those responsibilities. I will admit, I don't know enough about construction in Southwest Florida to contradict Mr. McMurray's contention that that's the way it's usually done, and I suspect maybe the attorneys will have to opine on that subject. What I'd like to tell you is that the bottom line for PPAC is that Pelican Preserve residents should not have to shoulder the expense of correcting deficiencies in infrastructure assets that exist before those assets are conveyed, and that those costs should be picked up by Lennar. Any way that that can be accomplished, we would be happy with, but we don't think we should have to pick up the costs for things that happened under Lennar's watch. Thank you.
Chris, next.
Next, Marcus Albrecht, Lake Meadow Drive, Silver Lakes. Algae in the ponds.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcus Albrecht. I'm here on behalf of Silver Lakes Homeowners Association. I'm a board member on the Silver Lakes HOA, and I'm also speaking on my own part as a homeowner in Silver Lakes. You are aware that over the last few months there has been quite a bit of difficulties with various algae floating on top of the ponds. And while there was some remedial action started, there was what you call a harvester making its way around the various areas of the ponds. The problem really was not rectified. As a matter of fact, in many instances, the problem was made worse through the activity of the contractor that you have selected to work on that. My fellow neighbors, fellow board members, and my neighbors are very disappointed in the non-action to clear up this problem. It is unsightly, it is smelly, it is disgusting, and we are looking for immediate rectification and a plan so that this problem can be made to disappear. Thank you very much.
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
may I ask a question of our manager?
certainly.
Would you enlighten us on when the work that was just described took place, and and if it's not satisfactory, what we're doing now?
Well, they've had a harvester out there, and the harvester is out there right now, and they're also raking the algae off the sides of the ponds and getting more and more of that vegetation out, and then they'll follow that up next week with the regime of spraying. The algae is a cyclical thing, especially in the summer when it gets real hot or there's some extra fertilizer that could ignite it. But they're out there working on it right now and have a spray remedy for next week. I don't think it's something that they can make disappear overnight. But there is action being taken, has been last week, and they're out there, and they'll be out there spraying next week. So it's in the regular maintenance schedule.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Next, number 3, Joe Schofield. Speaking to the flowway.
Joe Schofield from Carina. Yeah, I'm concerned about the flowway, and I have an email that was sent to Chris from a neighbor, Steve Citron, who lives, that flowway that has the sandbar in it is in his backyard. And he's away and asked me to just keep that on the top of the deck here so that we can hopefully get something done. He would like to see that absolutely removed, and I just wanted to represent him in that case. The other thing I'd like to talk about is the turnover, and I support all of Phil's comments. I've been on that inspection team, and those roads and infrastructure are deplorable. The third thing I want to talk about are the signs, and I understand that Lennar is probably going to, intention is to put them back up. And I've got a permit application that would be required, and from what I gather from this, first of all, they have to certify that no signs have been installed to this point. There's 2 on Benito Drive that I don't think they have a permit for, but this permit does apply to signs. It's part of the construction site requirement, so perhaps the attorney here can double check that, but I will be happy to leave this permit with you to review. I'm done.
Thank you. Next, Bob Gephardt, PPAC.
Bob Geppert from PPAC. I'm here to talk about the aeration project, which is later on the agenda. I don't know if now's the right time or later. But very briefly, we went out for bids for Phase 2 of aeration. We got 2 bids in. After doing some adjustments with the bids, we removed one of the ponds, Pond 13, which is a driving range, and it was one of the most costly ponds around. So we'll defer that one. Then the 2 bids were within 10% of each other. One of the bidders is a known quantity, the guy that did it last time, Lake Masters. We were very happy with him. So the work group recommended that we go with them, even though they were an extra $29,000. PPAC agreed with that. The engineering firm, Morris Riley, sent a recommendation also affirming that we ought to go with Lake Masters. So that's the way it's going to be coming to the board tonight.
Hey, Bob, what was the increase? Was there any particular area that the 29,000 difference was?
Well, the
accounted
driving
to?
range pond is huge. I mean, it was
But
the
you took
biggest.
that one off the board,
We
right?
just took it off.
Okay.
We may do it in the future as we get more money.
But even taking that, you have a variance of 29,000 between the 2 bids?
Maybe that, yeah. It's a $300,000 project, no matter which one does it. One's 303, I think, and the other was 329, 331.
Was it just incremental overages or differences in separate areas?
You
or-
couldn't line them up exactly.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
No, I don't know what their formulas were, but it was a $50,000 difference on one of the bonds. So I don't know how to reconcile that.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Bob, as I read the recommendation in the agenda, it says, PPAC did not select the low bid for this project, TSI Disaster Recovery LLC. And then in the next paragraph, it says, approve the bid to TSI Disaster Recovery LLC.
Then it probably wasn't written correctly. TSI is the people we want to have it. There was another bidder, and I don't recall their name right now.
Earth
Tech. But they weren't a known entity here, and since the price difference was marginal, and we were so happy the last time with what TSI did, and if I would remind the board, this was one of the more sensitive items to resident comments. This is the location of the cabinets, the noise, and all the various things. I mean, it took an awful lot of hand-holding to get this project go as smoothly as it did. And TSI did an outstanding job of working with our residents, and that alone would just seal the deal for us.
So that paragraph, the second paragraph in that on the background should refer to another company. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I haven't read it, Bill, and forgive me for not having read it, but our intent is that TSI be the correct bidder.
Thank you.
And that's what it says under recommendations.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a
but it's-
sentence that dropped out there because it was PPAC did not select the low bid. It should have said in there TSI was selected due to past work performance by its
That's correct.
subcontractor. So somehow I dropped a few words out of there. TSI was not the low bidder, but they were selected due to the performance of their subcontractor working previously.
I got it.
Yeah, we sent out about 6 or 7 bid packages, and we only got 2 back. That surprised me.
Mrs. Flaherty.
Which pond did you say you,
13.
I'm.
That's the Aqua Range, yeah.
You had a comment?
Madam Chairman, if I may, Mr. Geppert mentioned that the project engineer has provided his recommendation.
Yes.
Do we have that in writing?
Yes, we do.
And so if we could make that part of the minutes, that they recommend TSI as the contractor?
Yeah, and that went to Chris.
Okay, thank you.
So we've got it. I didn't bring a copy because I knew he had it.
Thank you.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. You said number 13, okay. So if I'm just trying to subtract it down
Mhm.
to see the same thing. Because I'm looking at other differences and I'm just wondering, okay.
Yeah, I didn't go over it line by line. We just looked at it as a package.
Okay.
But I did happen to notice that in one case, one of them for Pond 13 was 56,000, and the other was like 98,000. It was a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And we haven't given up trying to get some help from Lennar because Pond 13 is the driving range pond. And we have been working with Joe Smith in the past, and now I'm dealing with Torba and Terry Lilio to either get some maintenance help, just maintaining the pond, and/or some funds for aeration. Not hopeful, but we're trying. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one more public comment,
Okay.
and that is Charles Mann. Lennar WCI, and also to speak on item 6C, the Casella 1 and 2 turnover.
Your bedtime.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'll be brief at this point and then certainly be available for questions when the item comes up. And in general, this item was continued at the last meeting in an effort for staff to be able to meet with the Water Management District and ensure that there would be no, from the Water Management District standpoint, be no compliance issues or anything. It's my understanding, I was not there, but it's my understanding that meeting occurred and South Florida Water Management District is fine with the way that the Casella drainage system is constructed and is not intending on raising any compliance issues. Your staff can certainly confirm that as they were at that meeting. In addition, I came in on the tail end of the PPAC comments. I think I got the gist of it, and obviously I'm aware of Mr. McMurray's letter that was sent to this board and to the other folks. And with respect to the way the process should work, having done hundreds of plan developments and at least probably 50 similar to Pelican Preserve, I obviously concur with Mr. McMurray and how the process is supposed to work, with particular emphasis on the notion that once infrastructure is built and completed, under all the governing jurisdictions, it's supposed to then transfer to the maintenance entity. And in the case of a homeowners association, for example, once that homeowners association is created, the homeowners association is responsible for maintaining all of these things. If 10% of the homes are sold, then obviously the homeowners only pay 10% of the cost, the developer pays the rest, but the developer doesn't pay 100% of the cost of maintaining these items until build out. Now, that being said, what I also heard, I think, at the tail end of Mr. Measy's presentation is with respect to defects. We agree. When the developer turns over these items, it should be free from defect. In the case of the GSEDD, the district staff raises punch list items, we fix them. We agree with that 100%. We also agree that it has to comply with your permit criteria. No issue there. With respect to an ongoing construction site, it is normal where there will be damage to those roads after the maintenance entity, in this case, this board, if it accepts it, takes responsibility. We have to fix that. No different than any other situation. If you damage somebody else's property, you're responsible to fixing it. So again, I believe I read Tetra Tech's memo and recommendations today. I don't think we disagree with most of that, which says, you know, we'll have to be responsible for final lift on the roads. We'll have to be responsible for fixing damage. Our construction trucks do if they do trigger any damage. But to not accept the infrastructure when it's built until some date off in the future is inconsistent with any other community I'm aware of. To me, is asking for something or to be treated different than anyone else. And as I believe Mr. Murray indicated, just is not acceptable to Lennar and also would not be acceptable to the other agencies that approve these permits. So we respectfully ask that the board accept the transfer of Casella 1 and 2, but obviously, to the extent there's more issues, I will be here 3 or 4 hours later when the other public hearing is done, ready to answer those questions. Thank you.
Okay, that's all the public comment we have today.
That brings us to district engineer.
For the record, Danny Nelson with Tetra Tech, District Engineer. What we're going to be doing is giving the presentation on the next set of lake banks, and what the board had asked us to do previously was to go and look at those areas and come back with essentially what you'll see here is alternatives to the full-blown high-performance turf reinforcement matting, and looking at those areas where that could be reduced, and what the potential cost savings could be. So, could you also pass that out? What Chris is going to be passing down to you is what we did not have in the presentation is this is the areas that we're calling as other. So where we have the high performance, the HPTRM, the high performance turf reinforcement matting, that's the Armor Max. That's the yellow areas that you'll see on each one of these. The blue areas are where we're suggesting the possibility of doing something less stringent, which if you're looking at that cross section, the bottom portion is a 12-inch or 12-ounce woven mat, but it's not the turf, the HPTRM. It's not as an expensive product. It's not as stringent because the area of erosion is not as stringent. That's below the control line, and that would have the same rock material. Above the control is a 6-ounce matting that would actually allow the vegetation to grow through it. So this is one of the options that's been discussed with contractors as a way to look at saving money. So I'll go through each one of these, and if you have questions, let us know. But we basically looked at each one of the lakes and ponds. We actually,
I'm sorry, go ahead, ask your question.
When you explain them, could you tell them, say where they're located, what,
Neighborhood.
neighborhood?
doubtful, as I don't have a clue.
Stony Brook's the first one.
Okay, I know
The
some of
first
them,
two are Stony Brook.
and I know the fourth one is Step.
Margaret, another issue.
But I know, I'm sorry, I just figured out.
clarify for the record.
No, that's
So
great.
the residents also would know where they're
That's
located.
great, and to qualify my ignorance too, I can't even tell you the road I live on, so,
It's Cowboy Way.
redneck way, but.
Danny, are the open spaces the littorals?
Yes, so, so just to help for what, what you're seeing and what the audience is seeing, the yellow areas are the HPTRM, that's the Armor Max as we
Which
refer
we've used,
to it as.
which what we're using now.
It's what
right?
we're using now. So the, in the past, what we would have done in this case is the entire area would have been yellow on the residential side. The non-residential side is the area where we're doing nothing, which you'll see here in the area where Ed was actually talking about littoral plantings. That'd be the non-residential side, so you'll see some golf course sides as well in this. So the, what we did was we actually walked this in the field. Stephen from our office walked, some of them were walked with Mike and Ed, but Stephen walked every single one of them. We noted the areas of significant erosion, and that's where we had, say, the 12-plus inch drop-offs. Where we had less significant, say, 4 to 6. We recommended something as the blue areas, which are what I was just referring to in those cross-sections that we handed out. And as you'll see when we get into others, even on some of the residential sides, we had areas that had no erosion. So what we would recommend there is either doing nothing or just simply regrading it and resodding it in something even less stringent. So this is the first, and as Ed mentioned, this is in the Stony Brook area. So at the end, we'll also show you what, if you were to do the entire lake bank with the Armor Max, the high performance turf reinforcement matting, what the cost would be and what the savings would be if you reduce to this. So we can just go through these slides relatively quickly. You see basically where we're looking at, the methodology that we use to come up with this, if you just go to the next. So this lake really didn't have the significant drop-offs. It had a lot of problems, but not the significant drop-offs. So we felt this entire lake could benefit by using something less stringent. Again, the end product would look the same. What you see for littorals as well, just to clarify, we actually went to each one of these, looked at the development order to see what the requirement was. So we're not showing or suggesting locations for littorals. As Ed was mentioning, a likely candidate for these lakes, in particular this, would be on the non-residential side. So that's what you'll see there on this. This is also in Stony Brook. So we go on to the next one.
I tried to
This
figure
is
what that was.
this is Lake 90. Ed, you'll have to help me out where this is at.
It's behind the
Side of
church.
Silver Lake by the church.
Okay. So it's right across the
Across the
street.
street.
Right?
Basically.
Across the street. So again, you'll see the side by the church would have the Armor Max or that material, and the residential side not as significant, and then the sides that border Griffin as well as the FP&L easement would have no material. However, in a case like this, you know, that's not a significant area. I would suspect that we would go ahead and regrade, you know, the entire area. It just wouldn't have material to go on. 92.
Pinewood Lakes.
What you'll see here in between on the, so that'd be the south and east sides, you'll see the initial area of blue towards the south, and then you'll see a break in there that actually has a solid black line. That's because that area actually has riprap presently. And then you'll see the additional blue, which is a less stringent. And that next area is actually an area where there's no significant erosion, so we're suggesting no material, possibly just regrading and just resodding. The thing to point out is that, you know, we've got intermittent areas of repair and intermittent areas of non-repair. One of the things we'd have to look at with this in particular is access to the lake bank. And I believe one of the easements is in the cul-de-sac area next to where we're proposing, you know, no work or limited work. So when I say no work, we would likely be doing regrading at least in there, just no material, because that would likely be a point of access.
When we were out there on that black line area, it was suggested, and I agree, to put in a smaller stone in the riprap, because the Placos were trying to get in there, and that would basically shut them off, and it would provide a much better transition look as opposed to a rugged shoreline in a irregular shape. It'd make it
You talking about where the riprap?
where that black is, where the current riprap is. Yeah, it's pretty rugged. Lots of big holes.
And there's nothing here, right?
Riprap right now.
Okay, so riprap here.
No, riprap just here to fill in the holes. This area here doesn't have any problem at all.
But that's also riprap.
No, it's nothing.
No. Just-
Okay, so this is 110, which is in Waterford Village area. Again, you'll see the same thing, intermittent areas of more significant, areas of less, and just a small area that's not along a residential side that would have no work. Next one. This is in Callaway Greens, like 119. Same thing, some areas of significant, but majority of the lake is less significant, so a lot of areas where we could cut down on that.
Hey, Danny, when you go in and you put the Armor Max or you do your alternative solution, when aesthetically, if you're looking at the lake once it's been complete and you're at the, let's say, normal water level mark, how does the appearance of that look holistically around the lakes?
Well, with the cross section that you see there, we would be proposing that the finished would look the same. So that as far as resident, because I mean, I can imagine the question I would have if I was a resident was like, for instance, here where you've got the 3 or 4 or 5, you know, homes that are an area where that don't have significant erosion. I mean, I might question, well, you're doing the entire lake and I'm paying for this, but I'm getting nothing out of, you know, same sort of comments we've heard. But certainly the end product, and I think that's, you know, what the supervisors have said in the past, is they want that end product to be consistent. So with this, you would actually have the end product being consistent.
Since June 20th, when we hit control elevation, to answer your question, for the last 2 months, we have seldom seen the rock. The water level's been over the rock. It's that high.
And what do you think average condition at control?
Going to be a little bit, it'll be over control, obviously, because it's flowing over, but the stone should have a little bit of a peak of stone, maybe a foot of stone.
Yeah, so average year round, you'll be able to see
Oh.
some. So
Oh,
you will see, in some areas you'll see stone, and then you won't see. if
Well,
you're-
no, the stone is consistent at the control elevation.
Regardless of what the.
Regardless.
Okay, that was my point.
Yeah, It's set on a contour.
Danny, I just want to caution here. I mean, I'm not sure when a second evaluation was done where you walked the lake banks and looked at them, but the water level has been very high, and I have no doubt that when the water level goes back down, these conditions are no longer going to be accurate.
Well, it was, since we discussed this option, so it's been
Yeah.
within the rainy season, so, I mean, we've walked them previously, but as we know, the conditions change. Erosion's not gonna get better, it's gonna get worse. but-
Right, exactly.
So-
So my concern is that this won't be accurate. When you get back out there, the places where you think you're gonna be able to do a lesser repair are no longer gonna exist. Just wanna caution the board that too, that this.
Yes.
There's escarpment issues, but for the most part, I've been out there twice and seen this when the water was low and when the water was high. And they're not that far off, but there are areas. I know when he showed the picture of the one before, which was Waterford Village, that whole south side of Waterford Village is pretty good escarpment, and about where Tyler fell in the lake. So it's there, but I agree with it. There'll be modifications, so there needs to be a contingency allowance that when we get into design and start doing them, we might have to
A
modify
variance.
these.
Yeah, so we'd have to bake in a potential variance.
Yeah, at this point in time, if you don't have a 20% contingency, you're kidding yourself anyway.
Let Danny finish and then I'll.
Okay, going to the next one. So this is 121, which is over Championship,
Callaway.
Callaway Greens area. So again, this entire side it didn't change from where we were looking at previously. This has the entire side as the Armor Max type material, and then of course the opposite